Hi, welcome back to the Political Beat at lfpress.com, and this is a special London West by-election edition, and voters will go to the polls on August 1st, that's Thursday, and the clock is ticking down toward that vote. With me is summer reporter extraordinaire Brent Bowles.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you, Brent. Thanks for filling in, and you've done a lot on the by-election, which again is being held in London West, the seat made vacant when Chris Bentley resigned a few months ago. That was the Liberal cabinet minister. Give us a sense, Brent, based on, do we have a poll, any numbers that give us a sense of how the race is going?
We do. It's essentially coming down to two candidates who are the front runners. Ali Chahbar for the Conservatives is polling at 36%. Peggy Sattler is coming in at 31%. Then there's a bit of a gap. Ken Curran for the Liberals is well behind at 17%, and then the rest of the field makes up the remainder.
The other guys. And that's not our poll, right? Whose poll is that?
That's a forum poll.
Forum poll, yeah, okay.
It's a forum poll.
And so we got basically Tories in the lead, probably neck and neck given the margin of error with the NDP and Sattler, and then Curran way behind.
Right.
So the party's over for Ken Curran, and I don't think that's a huge surprise. I think that, this has been a Liberal seat for 10 years. Chris Bentley was a really high-profile cabinet minister. I think a lot of people had thought that he might be the next leader of the party. He seemed to take the bullet over the gas plant stuff, and he resigned. And can't say that I saw him out campaigning too much for Curran. I know he sent out a couple of tweets, and he was there the night that Curran got nominated. But this was not a good campaign. It was a risky move to pick this candidate. I mean, maybe they were swinging for the fences, but they took a risk. I don't think it worked, and I think that the rollout of the campaign was also not good when the London Free Press uncovered these nose stretchers about how he'd coached the Western football team and how he played for the Western football team, which I will use the word lie. That was a lie. That didn't help matters at all. So you had an already sort of like risky bet going off the rails. My understanding, and I don't know if you've heard this, is that some of his campaign team, they've gone, right? They've gone to the war zone against Doug Holliday in Toronto because they've sort of given up on this one.
Well, that's the thing. They had to run essentially a perfect campaign coming in when you're crippled by that gas plant scandal. They needed everything to go right from the get-go, and they really stumbled with those issues that you mentioned. And then there's the former ties to the NDP party, and he's come under a lot of flack for that. And then, parents are upset and with his role in losing extracurricular activities.
This is when he was the head of the OSSTF Teachers Union.
That's right.
That's right, yeah. So none of that worked.
A lot of baggage.
And I think that even if, I'm not saying that it wasn't a wise decision, but like Matt Brown was a city councillor. I'm quite certain they went to Matt and he said thanks, but no thanks. So they took what they could get. It didn't work. Curran's, sounds like, at least according to this forum poll, that Curran, and if you look at a bunch of other indicators, Curran's a non-issue at this point. So it looks like it's going to be Sattler or it's going to be Chahbar winning this seat. If the NDP win this seat, it would seem to me that would be a huge victory. I don't think the NDP, I think they've been a decade without a seat in London. It been since 99 to 2011, so that's more than a decade, when Teresa Armstrong won in London Fanshawe. If they win this seat, that's an even bigger beachhead into southwestern Ontario and into London. To me, that'd be pretty remarkable. But I'm not sure what to think of the fact that the Tories aren't just walking away with this thing.
Well, it should have been a riding that the Tories could have won. It was theirs for the taking going into this.
It had been a Tory riding before.
That's right. It had been a Tory riding for quite some time. So, the Liberals were coming in not at the top of their game. Conservatives should have had the opportunity to bounce back here, and they still do, depending on what happens tomorrow. But if they lose, that's a tough loss. That is. I don't want to underestimate the difficulty of winning a seat, but that should have been a gimme putt for the Conservatives out of any of their. Yeah.
So of those 5 seats, that to me is the one. They need to win in urban centers. It's understandable that it's difficult to break into that Liberal fortress in Toronto, but this is a seat that they should have won. So what does this say for Tim Hudak's fortunes going forward as the leader? When you're like, and maybe they will win it, but if they don't, you got to think, this is like London West in an urban setting, a seat that had been a Tory seat. The Liberals are sort of a non-issue. To me, it's very interesting that it's not a shoo-in for the Liberals or for the Tories, and that brings me to the one of the fringe parties, which is the Freedom Party. I think because it's so close between the Liberals and the New Democrats. I've spoken to a between the Tories and the New Democrats. I've spoken to a Tory operative who said every vote that the Freedom Party gets, and this is the Freedom Party, if you've never heard of them, who could blame you, right? It's Al Gretzky running, he's the candidate, that's Wayne Gretzky's uncle, but every vote that they get is a vote probably taken right out of Ali Jabbar's hip pocket. So let's just say they get like 4 or 5%. Is that enough to make the difference between the New Democrats losing or winning this seat? So all of a sudden you have a fringe party that's actually kind of potentially playing a pretty key role in this two-horse race, which I think is a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, who saw that? But I think you do see the New Democrats pulling out all the stops. We had a wraparound ad on our front page the other day that created some controversy. It was a New Democrats ad. And we were assailed for once for being pro-NDP, which I think is hilarious, right? Since everybody always says we're pro-Tory. But I just think that clearly the New Democrats are going for broke in London West. And I think you can tell, too, by the leaders' appearances who takes this seat, who still sees this seat as winnable, right?
Well, that's the thing. We have Hudak coming to town. We have Horwath coming to town. And Kathleen Wynne has been here, but it's the day before Election Day. And those are the two leaders that we see out and about in London West.
And she hasn't been here for at least a week.
Yeah, that's right.
Which would suggest, I mean, that would suggest the obvious, that this is not a seat that they're concentrating on. They're probably concentrating on, you know, fending off Doug Holliday and whatever that riding's called, Etobicoke Lakeshore or something, right? So maybe it sounds like they've given this one up. But again, I do think that the dynamic is really interesting, that I mean, it would be a great victory for the New Democrats, and it would be, in my opinion, a really big loss for the Tories, simply because this is a seat that theoretically I think they should have won, right? I think the Curran campaign was really poorly run. I think it was a bad campaign. I don't think it was a great candidate, and I think it was a bad campaign, and you're seeing that now in this. What were the numbers? He's way back, right?
36 for Ali Jabbar, 17 for Ken Curran.
Yeah, way back. So okay, Greg Van Morsel, our city editor,
yes,
who's very good at these prognostications. Greg actually predicted that Joe Fontana would beat Anne Marie on the morning of that vote in 2010, which nobody thought was going to happen. He's got a prediction for the 5 seats. He says London West is going Tory, so he's got Jabbar winning in London West. He says Windsor is going to go New Democrat, which is no surprise there. I think that's a given. Scarborough, Guildwood, the Liberals will retain that seat. Ottawa South, which had been McGuinty's seat, he thinks is going to go Tory. And then Etobicoke Lakeshore, which is a big battleground where the Deputy Toronto Mayor Doug Holliday is running. He says he figures it's a toss-up between the Liberals and the Tories. So that means we got, out of the 5 seats, we got 1 New Democrat win. This is according to Greg. Right. 1 New Democrat win, 1 Liberal win, 2 Tory wins, and a Tory Liberal toss-up. So I'm very curious to see how that breaks down. And the numbers kind of make sense to me, but I would say I see London West as a toss-up too. And that's, again, from the very beginning, I thought this is going to be a really interesting by-election because the dynamics there are so fascinating, and it's played out that way because here we are at the end, and we know it's not going to be the Liberals. That in and of itself is quite interesting.
Right.
But who's it going to be? Right, Sadler or Jabbar? And and again, none of this will change the dynamics at Queen's Park. No matter what happens with these 5 by-elections, it's still going to be minority Liberal government, the Conservatives in second place, and then New Democrats propping up the Liberals, presumably.
Well, the only thing that people had been wondering about going into this would be, you know, had the NDP been able to successfully pick up, let's say they swept, went 5 for 5,
yeah,
would Horwath feel empowered to force the general election, you know, sweep in, riding this momentum and say, now's the time to go. But if they only pick up 1 seat, maybe 2, then you're going to see the same old.
Yeah, maybe it's a missed opportunity for them too. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Brent. So again, you can vote if you live in London West on August 1st, and please follow all the results Thursday night. I think the polls close at 9, and we'll be covering this by-election extensively from both Windsor and from London. And you can follow all that at lfpress.com, and it'll be in Friday's editions of the Free Press. On behalf of Brent, I'm Pat for the Political Beat. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time at lfpress.com.